It's not like we haven't seen this problem coming for over a year. And it's not like we haven't seen over the last 5 or 6 months these terrorists moving in, taking control of western Iraq. Now they've taken control of Mosul. They're 100 miles from Baghdad. And what's the president doing? Taking a nap.
And with that, John Boehner leaves the podium and walks away very powerful. And Mary, as promised, we're now joined by Rick Francona, retired lieutenant colonel. And you know him from his days as a military analyst on the TV networks. Of course, a colonel in the U.S. Air Force, military intelligence expert. Hello, Rick.
Good morning.
Good to talk to you. So in response, the president said, I am not ruling anything out. Let's talk first about the problem. Who is this group, ISIS, some kind of offshoot of Al-Qaeda, and how on earth have they taken Mosul and Tikrit in such rapid succession?
Yeah, this group is very dangerous. It's the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. They call it different names, but their goal is to create a caliphate in the area that is the former Iraq and Syria. They believe that Iraq and Syria are artificial creations of the British and the French after World War I. There's some justification for that. And they want to turn this into an Islamic State. And they've had great success in northeastern Syria, and now they're having great success in western Iraq. And they're being joined by a lot of former Iraqi army people. They're bringing in people from outside. Whoever is running this organization has had some real formal military training, because they are making the Iraqi army look terrible.
Rick, now, are they an offshoot of Al-Qaeda? What is the difference between them and Al-Qaeda? Because this is the first we're ever hearing of this group. I've never heard of them before.
Yeah, this is the old AQI, the Al-Qaeda in Iraq. They've morphed into this group. They became the Islamic State of Iraq, and now they've expanded that to include neighboring Syria. They're so doctrinaire and fundamentalist that Al-Qaeda has almost washed their hands of them. If you look at what happened in Syria over the last year and a half, after the West really turned their back on the Syrian Free Syrian Army, the secularists that were trying to overthrow the government, you had this influx of all these Islamists from all over the world, including AQI. And when they came there, they were Al-Qaeda sponsored. There was also another group called the Jabhat al-Nusra, the Victory Front, also an Al-Qaeda offshoot. And the two of them were rival Al-Qaeda groups. But the ISIS, has broken away from Al-Qaeda. Now, when we see in the papers that Al-Qaeda has taken Mosul, that's not quite exactly right. I would say they're Al-Qaeda inspired, but they are totally separate now from Al-Qaeda.
Let me ask you this. The president says he rules nothing out. What could we do to stop this group? What should we have been doing? Because John McCain agrees with John Boehner. McCain said Obama needs a whole new national security team. So we've seen this coming, according to Boehner and McCain. So what should we have been doing, and what could we do now?
Well, this goes back to the failure of this administration in 2011 to secure a status of forces agreement extension with the government of Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki. To my thinking, it looks like the president just walked away from Iraq in 2011. He was looking for an excuse to get out of there, and when there was a tough spot in the negotiations, he just walked away and withdrew all of our forces prematurely, leaving the Iraqis on their own. So our training of the Iraqis really stopped, basically, and there was no backup force of U.S. forces in the country to stop just this from happening. So as that is the backdrop, now we see this reversal of fortune of the Iraqi army. The Iraqi military is basically collapsing in front of these guys. What can we do? What should we do? Well, we could certainly blunt their offensive, but I think the speaker needs to look at a map, because these guys are like 35 miles from Baghdad. Fallujah is just an hour's drive away, and they're concentrated there in strength. This looks really bad for the Maliki government. We could bring some air power in there, but the question is, do we want to do that? The battle lines are being drawn here. This is going to get much worse before it gets better. Our problem is, what do we do about it? Do we jump in and help al-Maliki, who many believe to be nothing more than an Iranian puppet? On the other side, if we don't do anything, we're handing Iraq to the Iranians again.
Let me ask you a question. If this group ISIS is an offshoot of al-Qaeda, and they're apparently way too crazy for al-Qaeda, who's fighting them? Is it what's left of the Iraqi army, or is it al-Qaeda fighting them? And if al-Qaeda is fighting them, shouldn't we just let them go?
Yeah, the problem is al-Qaeda really doesn't exist in Iraq anymore. These guys used to be the al-Qaeda in Iraq, and they're not. These guys are the major players that are now fighting the Iraqi government. The Iraqi government does not seem to be doing very well against them. A lot of that is because many of the people that are in ISIS now have formal Iraqi military training. If you look at the way these guys are fighting, this is not guerrilla hit and run. A bunch of terrorists driving car bombs into a city. These guys are mounting armored company-sized, battalion-sized attacks. Now they've got access to all this U.S. weaponry that the Iraqi army just left in Mosul. Hundreds of Humvees, trucks, tanks, even 2 helicopters that the ISIS is able to get up in the air. We're looking at a much bigger confrontation than we've ever seen before, a much bigger threat to the stability of Iraq. I mean, Iraq could come unglued at the seams here.
Well,
the only ones that profit from this are the Kurds.
Rick, how is this different, though? I mean, from us supporting similar groups in Libya, from us supporting similar groups in Syria. How is this that much different, except that it's Iraq and we had been there and lives were lost and treasure was lost?
Well, that's the dilemma. What do we do now? Who do we support? What side do we jump in? Are we going to jump in and support the Shia-dominated Iranian ally, al-Maliki, who now has, runs the government in Baghdad? Do we help them? And then you will see this really strange situation where you've got American air power supporting Iranian forces on the ground, because the IRGC Quds Force is already in Iraq helping. The juxtaposition of the forces here would just be so confusing. And of course, we missed the ball so long ago in Syria when we had the opportunity to support a secular uprising of Syrian officers. Now what we see in Syria is this hodgepodge of Islamic fighters from all over the world. You've got the Kurds fighting, you've got ISIS fighting, you've got Jabhat al-Nusra fighting, and you still have the secularists. And the Syrian regime has capitalized on this and is on the verge of retaking their country. Syria will soon be pretty firmly under the control, most of Syria under the control of Bashar al-Assad, and then you'll have this enclave of ISIS up in the northeast. This is a real mess because, in my opinion, we've abdicated much of our leadership in the area.
Rick, if this were your call, if you were the commander-in-chief, would you get involved or would you just stay out of it?
Unfortunately, Mary, it's hard not to get involved because we had invested so much in the Iraqis. And I don't think anyone is ready to sit back and just give Iraq to a bunch of Islamist fanatics, because you will create Afghanistan on steroids. And there will be a bloodbath, the likes of which we have not seen, as the Sunnis and the Shia go at each other yet again.
Well, let me ask you, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I want to make sure we get this in. Is this what we're going to see in Afghanistan once we leave Afghanistan? I mean, whether it's with the 9,000 troops there or when that finally dissipates and we have no troops there, is this a preview?
I think it is, Steve. We're doing the same thing in Afghanistan. We're telling the enemy the day that we're leaving. Right. If you're the Taliban, if you're ISIS, if you were al-Qaeda in Iraq, all you do is wait and say, well, the Americans are leaving, and I think Afghanistan, there will be no Americans there after 2016. The bulk of them will be gone later this year. They said, well, we'll just wait. Time is on our side, and then we'll turn Afghanistan back into the Islamic emirate that it once was.
It's very, very frightening. Rick, always great to hear your expertise, and thank you for joining us today.
I'm sorry I didn't have better news for you, Steve.
No, hey, we like getting the truth, no matter how painful it is. Rick Francona, ladies and gentlemen, retired Lieutenant Colonel in the U.S. Air Force, military intelligence expert here on the Steve Malzberg Show. It's frightening, and I don't know. I mean, I don't want to get us involved again in Iraq.
Well, do you throw good money after bad?
But on the other hand, can you let happen the scenario that Rick put forth? But then again, this president has supported, as I pointed out, al-Qaeda terrorists fighting in Libya, al-Qaeda terrorists fighting in Syria. So maybe he's not adverse to letting it just unfold and happen here. I don't know.
Maybe we can't fight it. Maybe it's a battle we can't win.
That could be. And we're going to get more expert opinion on the panel, which is next. And on this version of the Malzberg panel, we'll be joined by by General Paul E. Vallely and Fred Fleitz of Lignet. So we'll get more from the best as Mary and I return right here on the Steve Malzberg Show. Don't go away.